Silas Drummond rode past Agnes Linkfist's log cabin every week from August through February, always watching for the woodpile that never appeared. "She's not cutting wood," he told the men at the general store in September. "I've been watching. No stack, no split logs, nothing. That woman's given up. Maybe she's buying it," someone guessed. With what money? Henrik hadn't left her anything but debts and 80 acres of stump-filled land. She couldn't afford to buy wood. Drummond smiled, the smile of a man already counting profits before they arrived. "I give her until January, February at the latest. Then she'll come to me, hat in hand, begging me to take that land off her." In October he rode by and it was the same, no woodpile. In November he passed again and still nothing, no woodpile. In December he rode past as the first snow of the season began to fall, when every other log house in the county already had walls of split wood stacked outside, and he saw the familiar sight. Not a single cord in view. "She's crazy," he declared at the store, "or she plans to freeze. Either way, that land will be mine by spring." But Agnes Linkfist was not crazy, and she did not plan to freeze. She was doing something none of her neighbors had thought of, something old Mrs. Brigida had shown her in the weeks after Henrik's death. A way to stay warm all winter, while Silas Drummond kept staring at her yard and waiting for her to fail. Henrik Linkfist had died in July, crushed when the tree he was felling swung wrong and fell the wrong way. They had been married only 2 years, homesteading, building a life, turning 80 acres of Iowa forest into a farm that might one day support a family. But he died before they had children, before the cabin was finished, before their shared dreams could take root. Agnes buried him by the creek, in the place where wildflowers grew thick every spring. Then she sat down and calculated what it would take to survive the winter alone. The numbers were brutal. At least 20 cords of wood to heat the cabin through an Iowa winter. Working alone, she might cut 2 cords herself before the first snow, using tools made for a man's hands. The rest would have to be bought at $4 a cord, money she did not have and could not earn in time. She had even considered selling the land not to Drummond, never to Drummond, but to someone, until old Mrs. Brigida appeared at her door with a basket of bread and a question that changed everything. "Where are you going to keep your wood?" Agnes looked at the old Swedish woman without understanding. "Outside. Where else?" "In Sweden, we store wood underground, in cellars, in pits, in caves dug into hillsides." Brigida set the basket down and looked around the property, her silver hair catching the July sun. "Wood left out here gets wet. Rain. Snow. Ice. Wet wood burns poorly, gives less heat, makes more smoke. Underground, wood stays dry, always dry, and it's close to the house. So when blizzards come, you don't have to haul it through drifts." "I don't have a cellar." "Then dig one. You still have months until winter. 4 months. 4 months is enough to dig a storage pit. Listen further, because what old Mrs. Brigida taught her was exactly why. By February, Agnes had 30 cords of dry, seasoned wood, while everyone else was burning wet, hissing logs that threw smoke and only half the heat they should have. The digging took most of August and September. Agnes worked 6 days a week in daylight, carving out a large chamber in the earth behind the cabin. Iowa soil was heavy clay but diggable, and she moved it 1 shovel, 1 bucket, 1 pile at a time. The main chamber was 20 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 8 feet deep, big enough to hold 40 cords if stacked carefully. The walls were shored with logs she salvaged from trees Henrik had felled before he died, creating a wooden frame inside the earthen hole to hold the shape for years. The entrance was a sloped tunnel from ground level down to the chamber floor, wide enough to drag a sled loaded with logs through. She lined the tunnel with flat stones gathered from the creek, creating a surface that let water run off instead of pooling in the storage area. Ventilation was critical. Old Mrs. Brigida had been clear about that. Wood stored underground without airflow would rot, mold, and become useless. So Agnes dug a second shaft at the far end of the chamber, a narrow chimney-like tube rising to the surface, capped with a wooden lid to keep rain out while still allowing air to move. Air entered through the tunnel, flowed over the stacked rows of wood, and exited through the vent, keeping everything dry. She finished digging by late September and immediately began filling it. She could not cut 30 cords herself, but she did not have to. Before he died, Henrik had felled dozens of trees and left them lying, planning to buck them later when he had time. Now Agnes bucked them one by one, split what she could, left the rest whole, and dragged everything down the tunnel into the underground chamber. She worked through October, racing the calendar. She bartered labor for wood, helping neighbors with harvest in exchange for logs they had already cut. She bought 10 cords at $3 each from a man who needed cash more than fuel, paying with money she had saved for spring seed. She gathered deadfall in the woods, dry branches and fallen limbs that burned fast and hot. By November 1st, she had 32 cords stored underground, stacked in rows nearly to the ceiling, dry, seasoned, and ready. She sealed the tunnel entrance with a heavy, tight-fitting wooden door insulated with straw. From the outside, there was nothing to see. No woodpile, no logs, no sign she had any fuel at all. Just a log cabin with a thin thread of smoke rising from the chimney and a widow who was supposed to be freezing to death. Silas Drummond visited in early December, riding up to her house with the face of a man bringing bad news, but actually quite pleased to deliver it. "Mrs. Linkfist," he said without dismounting, "I've noticed you haven't put up any wood for winter." Agnes was outside fetching water from the well at the time. She set the bucket down and looked up at him, her pale gray eyes calm and revealing nothing. "Sir, the whole county has seen it. They're worried for you. I'm worried for you." His face arranged itself into concern, but his eyes did not. "I want to help. I'll give you $300 for the land right now. You can go back east, find your family, and start over somewhere that doesn't force you to live alone like this." "That's generous, Mr. Drummond. It's realistic. You have no wood. You have no husband. You have no future here." He leaned forward in the saddle, the concern dropping to reveal something colder. "Take the money, Agnes. Take it before January comes and you have to beg me for half that amount." Agnes lifted the water bucket and walked toward the cabin. "I thank you for your concern, but I'm not selling. You'll freeze." "Maybe." She did not turn back. "Or maybe not. Either way, it's not your business." Drummond rode off, and Agnes stepped inside, where the stove was burning with dry, seasoned wood that threw heat, feeding a fire that could burn for 3 years with the wood she had buried beneath her feet. The winter of 1855 was one of the harshest in Iowa history. January temperatures dropped to 30 below and stayed there for 3 weeks. Snow piled into drifts that buried fences and blocked roads. People burned through their wood piles at an alarming rate. Wood left outside in rain and snow was wet, and wet wood burns fast but gives little heat. By February, half the county was in trouble. Families that had put up 20 cords in October were down to 5, the remaining logs wet and hissing, barely keeping the houses from freezing solid. Men had to go desperately into the woods, cut green timber that was worse than wet wood, smoke and steam rising but almost no warmth. In mid-February, Silas Drummond sent men to check on Agnes Linkfist, expecting to find her nearly frozen and ready to accept any price he offered for the land. But what they saw was a log cabin with steady smoke rising from the chimney, a widow in a warm wool dress opening the door, and the smell of bread baking in the oven, something that required heat to work. "Mr. Drummond wants to know if you're still alive," one said, voice awkward. "As you can see. He also wants to know where your wood came from." Agnes smiled, the first smile she had given anyone since Henrik died. "Would you like to see?" She led them around, back to the sealed entrance of the underground storage. She pulled open the heavy door, revealing the sloped tunnel descending into darkness, and motioned for them to follow. They stepped down into the earth, the temperature rising gradually as they went deeper, the air dry and still. At the bottom, they entered the chamber she had dug 6 months earlier and stopped dead. Wood was stacked in rows nearly to the ceiling, more than 30 cords, dry as kindling, waiting to be burned. No snow on top. No ice at all. No water, no rot, no trace of dampness. Just cord after cord of seasoned wood. Enough fuel to heat a house for 2 winters, stored in a cellar no one had known existed. "How?" one man asked. "I dug it last summer, before the first snow fell." Agnes walked along the stacked rows, running her hand over logs still as dry as they had been in October. Above ground, wood gets wet. Wet wood burns poorly. Underground, wood stays dry. Dry wood burns hot and long. Nothing complicated. But no one did it. No one stored wood underground. In Sweden, everyone did. Old Mrs. Birgitta taught me. Her grandmother taught her. It's not a secret, just something people here never thought of. The men went back and told Silas Drummond what they had seen. They told him about the underground cellar, the rows of dry wood, and the widow who had spent the summer digging while everyone thought she was giving up. They told him about the smile on her face as she showed them the tunnel, the quiet satisfaction of someone underestimated who had proved them all wrong. The next day, Drummond himself came, riding to the cabin with a face no longer smug, no longer certain. He found Agnes outside, splitting a log she had just brought up from the cellar, her breath steaming in the cold air as she worked. "I want to see," he said. "See what?" "The cellar. The underground storage. I want to know how much wood you have." Agnes set the axe down and looked at him, her pale gray eyes as unreadable as ever. "Still hoping I'll sell? I want to understand. I've bought up farms for 20 years. I've seen dozens of widows fail, dozens of families quit. You were supposed to be one of them. You were supposed to run out of wood before Christmas, beg me for help in January, and leave in February." He dismounted, something he almost never did, and stood facing her at eye level. "And now you have more wood than I do." "How?" "I dug a pit and filled it with wood. Nothing complicated, Mr. Drummond. Just work. Show me." She showed him. She led him down the tunnel into the cellar, past rows of wood stacked high that a widow should not have been able to put up alone. She showed him the vent shaft, the stone-lined floor, the log-reinforced walls. She showed him everything, because she had nothing to hide and nothing to fear, and because she wanted him to understand exactly how badly he had underestimated her. Drummond walked the length of the cellar, counting cords, calculating value. When he reached the far wall, he turned back to her with something like respect. "You did all this alone? I had help digging a few days. Mrs. Birgitta's son came to assist, but the planning was mine, the labor was mine. The wood is mine. I'll give you $600 for the land. No. 800. No. 1,000. That's more than the land is worth. More than Henrik paid. I know what this land is worth, Mr. Drummond. I know what I've built here, and I will not sell. Not to you. Not to anyone." Agnes walked to the tunnel entrance and motioned for him to leave. "You can go now. And don't ride past my house anymore counting a woodpile that isn't there. I have everything I need, and I need nothing from you." He left without another word. He never came back. When spring arrived, he was the one buying wood at high prices, because his own supply had run out after a winter he once believed would end Agnes Linkfist's life, but instead ended his assumptions. Old Mrs. Birgitta died in the summer of 1855, peacefully in the house her son had built for her 20 years earlier. Agnes was at her side at the end, holding her hand and thanking her for the knowledge that had saved her life. "Just passing it on," the old woman said. "My grandmother taught me. I taught you. Now you teach others. That's how everything keeps going." And Agnes did teach others. She showed neighbors the underground cellar, explained the principle, helped them dig their own storage pits before the next winter. By 1860, half the farms in the county had underground wood storage, and the desperation of wet wood in February 1855 became a story people told rather than relived. She remarried in 1857 to a carpenter named Eric Holberg, who first came to see her underground storage and stayed to help her expand it. Together they built a larger cellar, added a second entrance, creating a system that could hold 50 cords of dry wood for any Iowa winter. They raised 4 children in the log cabin Agnes had kept out of Silas Drummond's hands. All of them grew up knowing the best way to prepare for winter was to store what you needed underground, where weather could not reach it, working in summer to stay warm in February. Silas Drummond died in 1868 without ever acquiring Agnes's land. His estate was divided among his children, none of whom had his knack for land accumulation, and the Drummond empire slowly dissolved while the farms he once wanted to swallow continued to grow. The original underground cellar is gone now, collapsed decades ago. The wood rotted and the earth reclaimed it, but the principle remains. And somewhere in Iowa, there are probably still farmers storing wood underground, keeping it dry through wet months and burning seasoned logs in February that their neighbors once thought impossible. Agnes Linkfist Holberg lived until 1901, dying at 72 on the very land she had refused to sell. Her obituary mentioned her children, her grandchildren, and a long life on the farm she built with 2 husbands. It did not mention Silas Drummond, or the missing woodpile, or the 30 cords of dry wood that kept her alive when everyone thought she would freeze. But those who knew the story still told it, and those who heard it passed it on. The widow with no woodpile outside, the underground cellar, and the man who counted her wood from horseback without ever thinking to look beneath his feet. Some stories end with the hero defeating the villain. This one ends more simply. A woman dug a hole and filled it with wood. Let her neighbors think she had failed while quietly preparing to succeed. She survived not by begging for help, but by working before she needed it. If this story about the underground storage makes you think, consider subscribing to hear more stories of quiet preparation. What woodpile do people think you don't have? And where have you buried it? If you enjoy gripping historical stories and deep lessons like this, please hit subscribe so you don't miss the next videos. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.